5.
And now a story you might have missed. The Obama administration to the United Nations this week of numerous human rights violations. A whole range of stuff, from sexual assaults in prisons to discriminatory lending to discrimination against gays and women, and on the list goes. Gregg Jarrett is reporting live from our New York newsroom. And Gregg, this report is not without controversy.
Yeah, we are awful people, Meg, when you read this thing. This report, by our own State Department, by the way, stunning in its criticism of America, condemning it for discriminating against the disabled, homosexual, women, Native Americans, Black, Hispanic, you name it, and those who don't speak English. It criticizes the rate of sexual assault in American prisons, the detention of suspected terrorists at Gitmo. There is what appears to be some blatant pandering to Muslims. The current economic crisis, this is interesting, blamed on discriminatory lending practices in the housing sector. And then, sounding like political campaign literature, it extols the virtues of the historic progress President Obama is making, especially in enacting healthcare reform and financial reform. Now, remember, Meg, as you pointed out, this report goes to the infamous United Nations Human Rights Council, which spends much of its time criticizing Israel and largely ignoring the real notorious violators of human rights: Sudan, Iran, North Korea, Saudi Arabia. The unfortunate consequence here may be that this simply aids our nation's critics and enemies who love to portray America as a haven for hatred and rights abuses. So go on to the Washington Times website, by the way. They have a very interesting analysis of this, and check out the document itself. When you finish it, you're going to want to renounce your American citizenship and move to an island, I promise you. We're bad people.
All right, Gregg Jarrett, thank you. Well, joining me now with more on this is Deneen Borelli. She's a fellow with the Black conservative public policy group Project 21 and a Fox News contributor. And Christopher Hahn, a Democratic strategist and former aide to Democratic Senator in New York, Chuck Schumer. All right, panel. So, it's funny the way Gregg puts that, but it's true because the report outlines a long list of America's human rights violations. And the thing that interested me, Deneen, was that President Bush refused to submit such a report to this group, saying, we're not going to do this because it's going to give fuel to our enemies who are going to use it, saying, look at all the things America does when countries like North Korea don't do it, and would be used essentially as a tool against us by our enemies. President Obama reversed course.
Yeah, well, Bush was correct in that assessment. But listen, this is the Obama apology tour on steroids. And it's outrageous, I think. This is a perfect example of him ignoring that our economy is tanking, unemployment keeps going up, and we have individuals who think this is the greatest thing on earth, but it's a human rights audit, which is ridiculous because this is the freest, most generous country
the report
on
itself,
the planet.
The report itself does point to the fact that the United States has systems in place to deal with these injustices. It doesn't just indict us for things that, nobody's going to argue that there isn't predatory lending in the United States.
Why
no one's going to argue that there isn't predatory.
Why do we need the UN to tell America how to deal with human rights?
We want to be out there telling people how to use human rights. We have to take a close look at what we do here. And listen, the arc of progress favors justice. The United States is constantly improving. No one's going to say that we are perfect. We are striving to be perfect.
But why do we need the UN to tell us what to do about human rights?
Like I said, we want to be out there telling the world what human rights are. We have to examine our human rights system and show the world that we are capable, that we understand that there are some injustices here, but this is how we deal with it here in America. We're trying to work towards a more perfect union here in the United States.
Go ahead,
this is a book report to the UN. That's all it is. And what you're outlining is just ridiculous because, listen, these so-called violations are nothing in comparison to Iran, Iraq, Venezuela,
Absolutely.
Cuba.
But we should hold ourselves to a much higher standard than Iran, Iraq, Cuba, Saudi Arabia, Cameroon,
but let me ask you this. Here's the thing that caught my eye. So after we submit our report, there's a group in the UN that's going to get together and they're going to issue recommendations for what should be done to the United States. This group is made up of 3 countries. France, all right, Japan, and Cameroon. Cameroon, which is one of 13 countries of the 47-member Human Rights Council, ranked not free.
Hey, listen,
free.
Megyn,
Cameroon is going to tell the United States how to improve its human rights?
Every panel of judges has the Russian judge at the Olympic who's going to give you an 8 when everybody else is giving you a 10. Cameroon is. We're not necessarily going to take the result. This is not a judging process. Cameroon is not going to tell us what we should or shouldn't do.
Listen,
that is
I have a report for the UN. It's called the Declaration of Independence. That's the report that should have been filed with the UN.
I agree, and I believe.
How much time and resources went into this report? It's ridiculous.
I'm glad you brought brought up the Declaration of Independence because I think it points to a very important fact that we ignore often, that rights are endowed by the Creator, not because you were born beyond some invisible line that we created years ago. Rights were endowed by the Creator in those life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. And we as Americans strive to give that across the world, across this nation, and we work very hard.
But do you really think, Christopher, that countries like North Korea and China are going to be so inspired by our submitting this report that they too are either going to do it or look at their own human rights record?
I don't think so. You know, Megyn, I'm not out here saying that they're going to look at this report and saying, oh, they're inspired by America. But, you know, we have to judge, judge not least you yourself be judged. We're out there judging. We're out there pointing the finger. We're out there saying, hey, you have to improve here, 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 and here. And we listen. We understand. We acknowledge that we have to improve in certain places, too. Now, this goes to a lot of Obama's style as a former attorney, as a constitutional law professor. Put out your flaws. Put them out there. Let people know that they're there and that we're working on them. And that we have a process.
Deneen, this is from the Washington Times. They say, dictatorships, authoritarian regimes, and theocracies competing for legitimacy on the world stage have now been handed a potent new weapon, the kind of assessment they would never offer about their own governments. Because now they can hold this up and say, look, the United States discriminates against the disabled, homosexuals, women, Native Americans, blacks, Hispanics, those who don't speak English, Muslims, and on it goes.
It's so not true. And again, I bring up the Declaration of Independence. What the UN should be doing is focusing on Iran. They're getting away with everything. Why can't they put their places on that?
The report does not say that the United States discriminates against these people. The report says that there is discrimination against these people in the United States, and the United States has a policy to deal with it.
Will
That's what the
Iran
report
parse
says.
that language?
Listen, I read the Washington Times, and I started to read. I read a lot of the report itself. The report itself basically
your
says,
eyes glazed over.
It's a long report, 29 pages, but it's which is not that long. But when you look at the report itself, it shows that it's not that there's institutional discrimination in the countries that you mentioned. There's institutional discrimination going on. There's no institutional discrimination by the United States government that's sanctioned by the government to discriminate.
Some
here.
of the people
we have a
involved in
process
this
to deal
report-
with individuals discriminating against them. And
Now,
that's what these
I want
countries
our viewers to know, okay? According to Amnesty International, Cameroon, government opponents, journalists, and human rights defenders were arrested, detained, and tried for offenses relating to criticism of the government. These are the people who are now going to tell us how to behave when it comes to human rights. All right, good debate.
Nice
I appreciate it, Christopher and Deneen. Coming up, folks, a special Studio B with Shepard Smith, live from the museum in our nation's capital. Shep, what are you doing down there today?
Man, it is a beautiful place. I tell you, Megyn, today they're opening a new exhibit.